For more on Japan's economy, I spoke to Shihoko Goto. She is the Senior Northeast Asia Associate at the Woodrow Wilson Center's Asia program.
Investors had already anticipated this, quite frankly, dismal performance by the Japanese.
On the GDP growth, which is sort of the overall economy.
Right.
Why did it drop? Because weren't things going really well for the past 4 or 5 quarters? ABENOMICS was kicking in place. Everybody was shopping. I mean, things were good. The markets have had a record last year and a half or so. So isn't that odd that GDP numbers or growth is slow? Right.
Well, the anticipated bit of this equation is the fact that in April, the consumption tax in Japan was raised from 5% to 8%. So until April, people had been buying their big ticket items. They had been buying their cars, their big refrigerators, their big TVs, what have you. After that, they really haven't spent much, and also that has impacted business spending as well. So you're not seeing capital expenditure. But here's the thing, the Japanese government is not panicking over these numbers, and neither are the investors.
Let me explain to our audience real quick. This consumption tax is basically a sales tax on all most goods and services. They raised it in April. It was a concern for some people, and a lot of analysts that we talked to, not you, said that it wouldn't be a big deal, it would be fine. And clearly these numbers show that it does have an impact on the overall economy. I mean, that's what you're saying, right?
It does, but some would argue that the worst is now over, and that the next quarter we will see a better performance, that there are needs, and corporate profit is actually going up. And so we will actually see more spending, and this is just a blip in the overall trajectory of Japanese economic recovery. And certainly that is the scenario that the government is pushing. And so for now, despite this latest data, the government is saying we will stay the course. We will continue with our Abenomics policy of monetary policy, monetary easing, quantitative easing, fiscal spending, and structural reform. So they are staying the course. And what does that course mean? One of the plans is to increase that particular tax, the spending tax, yet again, to 10%.
But by the way, they're doing this because they need to pay off the debt. That's right. Why they're raising the tax. It's not just for fun. They're paying. they're raising the tax because they want to pay off the debt.
Right.
And I think ABENOMICS has sort of 2 chapters, sort of before this tax hike and now after the tax hike.
Right.
What does the second chapter of Abe's plan entail?
Well, as you pointed out, Japan is heavily indebted. It has one of the highest debt to GDP ratios amongst industrialized countries. And the public, even though there was reluctance to accept this tax hike, the public was willing to actually absorb it because everyone knows that things cannot continue the way things are going at the moment. And another part of this equation is a very aging society in Japan, that already about 25% of the population is 65 years old or over. And that proportion will go up to about 40% within the next 20 years or so. So Japan is facing this big cliff. There needs to be some action, and so tax hikes are one way to address it. But is that enough? There are other parts to Abenomics that have been implemented, but the real concern is, are they just short-term solutions, or does it have legs? Can it actually sustain growth?
I mean, we can have a whole nother conversation on why you need to have more kids, because ultimately the kids work and they pay taxes and they pay for the senior folks who need to be cared for.
Right.
That's a different conversation, but I do want to ask you very quickly, I have a minute left. When you look towards the end of this year, what will Abenomics, will there be any surprises that you think that he might suggest, at least to the market? And then where do we go in terms of the expectations now? Because they were really high, things have been great. This last number, they're coming back down again. What do we do?
Abe's success, his administration's success, will depend on economic success. And right now, some are expecting further stimulus packages to increase public spending, other measures that will increase growth in the longer term, in the short term. But what really needs to happen is structural reform. Things like easing up the labor market, opening up the country to immigration, letting more women take leadership roles. Those kind of policies we will not probably see from the Abe administration by the end of this year.
But you would like to see them.
Very much so.